Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this handsome beast is the new Cupra Born. Now, as you're all aware, Volkswagen Group has pretty much got itself established with its electric vehicles. Audi with its e-tron series, Skoda with the Enyaq, and Volkswagen with the ID series with the 3, 4 and 5. And now it's the turn of Cupra with the Born. Now, this is based on the Volkswagen's MEB platform, and it's actually underneath pretty much identical to the Volkswagen ID.3. But Cupra just couldn't do a copy and paste on the car. They had to come up with a USP. So they're claiming that the Cupra Born is kind of an electric hot hatch. Well, I've had this Cupra Born for a week and I'm going to answer two questions. Number one, is it a good car? And number two, can it be classed as an electric hot hatchback? So, styling. Straight off the bat, the Cupra Born looks miles better, I think, than the Volkswagen ID.3, which has a hint of family-friendly plain Jane about it. But with the Born, it does look aggressive. It does look like a hot hatch. It's got these lovely copper accents on the front, which we've become used to now with the Cupra range. And it just has a very aggressive, sporty look to it. However, it can't quite disguise the fact that when you look at it on a side-on profile, it has got quite a boxy shape to it, and it does remind me a little bit of the Hyundai iX20 or perhaps even the Nissan Note. And as a result, you do get a very family-friendly look to it, especially from side-on view, so you can tell it is not really a proper aggressive Cupra that we've been used to with the Leon. However, I do still think it's a very handsome and attractive car, even in this V2 spec where we have got 19-inch alloy wheels, and if you go for the V3, they get bumped up to 20s. But let me know what you think of the Cupra Born styling in the comments section below. But I do think they are off to a great start by having the Born look like an aggressive, sporty hatchback. So yeah, I do think they're off to a good start, and I now think it's time we have a look at the interior to see if it's still sporty inside. Sat in the front of the Born, you are greeted by a very stylish, comfortable, and actually really nicely designed interior. It is a very nice place to sit and be. Now, as I mentioned, I do kind of see the Born as having this kind of boxy, family-friendly look to it, not like a traditional hatchback. So as a result, getting in and out of the Born is really easy because you've got a slightly higher roofline. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, this might actually be a really nice car to get in and out of, but if you're not after anything that's a bit sporty, then I'd recommend looking at the Volkswagen ID.3. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. They do hold a bear like me in place, and there's actually a good level of adjustment. However, it is manual, and the steering, where you got both rake and reach adjustment, and I do love the fact that the instrument binnacle goes up and down with the steering column as well. So you can guarantee you've got a good field of view with it. So that is really handy. I will also mention that just like a Tesla or an MG4, the car comes to life when you actually get in and sit in the driver's seat. It's only when you put your foot on the brake and activate a gear that it fully comes to life and it's all ready to go. So that's something I do also like about the Born. It's just a nice kind of, futuristic way of getting going. There's no pressing buttons or anything to turn the car on. Well, so I thought, because there is actually a button on the steering column, which is a bit old school, where you can turn on or off the Born. So Cupra have definitely remembered to consider those that are still a bit old school and perhaps not quite ready yet to just have the car come to life and turn off when they leave. So that's quite, considerate of them. Interior quality in the Born is actually really nice as well. We have got some really nice fabric here on the seats and they are very comfortable. We've got soft touch plastic here on top of the dash, but we've got this kind of soft fabric material here behind the instrument binnacle. It's probably made of recycled materials, and we've also got it here on the center console. And then here on the door panel we have got a bit of what feels a bit like Alcantara, so that is actually really nice to rest your arm on. Now we have got some hard scratchy plastics lower down, and we have got this satin effect trim here on the dash, and we've got this 3D cutout or 3D design which mimics what we've got on the C-pillar. So I do really like that, and it does give a bit of a sporty feel to the Cupra Born's interior. And then we have got the steering wheel, which is of leather and it's perforated as well, again adding to that sporty feel. So when it comes to the interior quality, yeah, I'm actually impressed by it. It feels like a quality product in here. Cubby spaces in the Born, for the most part, are actually really good and very well thought out. So the door pockets are of a really nice, decent size and depth. You can get a medium to even large size bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now here up on the center console, we've actually got a large and long area, which is covered, but if you pull back the lid, it does reveal 2 cup holders, which are of a decent size and depth. They are rubber lined as well with a couple of plastic grippers. And then just behind there, we've got a bit of additional space. Again, it is rubber lined, so you could perhaps put a wallet or something in there, and it's actually nicely tucked away. And then very easily, you can just pull back the lid and keep everything covered. What I have done actually is put a little coffee cup in there and then pull the lid back just to hold the coffee cup in place, even though I knew it wasn't going anywhere. Then behind there, we have got the center armrest, and if I lift it up, it reveals a wireless charging pad, 2 USB-C charging inputs, and a bit of additional space as well, which is very handy. And all of it is rubber lined, so you kind of know that nothing's going to roll around anywhere whilst you're driving. Another thing I really do like is that you can slide the armrest forward, so if your phone is in there wirelessly charging and perhaps you leave the vehicle, no one's going to be able to see it in there. So I do really like it. And I do love as well the copper surrounds around the trim in here, again adding to that sporty touch. And then we've got the glove box, which is quite disappointing because it is essentially half the size as what you would expect. So as I said, that is a little bit disappointing, but it's got a little bit of depth in there, which I do like, but it's just a shame again, it's not lined with any fabric. So as I said, for the most part, the cubby spaces here in the Born are actually really good and very well thought out. It's just the glove box, which is a bit disappointing. But other than that, everything else is very good and I am impressed. So let's talk physical switches in the Born's cabin, because there's hardly any of them, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this. So we've got the window switches, we've got the hazard light, we've got your SOS button, 2 buttons on the steering wheel. One of them does your drive mode select, one of them goes straight to Cupra and the e-boost. We've got your button on the steering column to turn everything on or off, and that's it. Everything else is touch sensitive. We have got a little rotary knob here on the door, so you can do things like adjust the mirrors and also fold the mirrors in, but that's not really a kind of a one physical button, that's just a little rotary knob. But everything else is touch sensitive, which leads me on to the infotainment system. So we have a 12-inch infotainment touchscreen display. Now the positives, it's really nice and clear, the graphics are really lovely, and for the most part it's easy to read when on the move. However, underneath we have got some touch sensitive buttons, and if you have driven a Golf or Seat Leon, you'll know where I'm going with this. We've got some touch sensitive buttons here to adjust the temperature and also the volume. The disappointing thing is when driving at night, these don't light up, so it can be difficult to adjust the temperature whilst you're driving. So that's a little bit disappointing. Also, ergonomically on the screen, I think it needs a little bit of work. So if I up the temperature now, I have to look on the far side of the screen to see where the temperature is. With a lot of other displays that I've come across, you find that the temperature actually kind of comes up at the bottom. So as I'm adjusting the temperature, I'd love it to appear just here in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, so I don't have to look on the far side. And also it means my finger's not going to kind of disappear and lose track of where I'm touching. So that is a little bit disappointing. Also, the actual menus themselves are pretty easy to use when on the move. It's not the quickest of displays. It can be a little bit hesitant and a little bit laggy. And you have to do all the things like the dual zone climate control, changing your drive modes or various settings in the drive mode display, and just going through the general menus via the touchscreen, which is a bit disappointing and can be a distraction whilst you're driving. So when it comes to the air conditioning, I would say just make sure you've got everything set before you set off. However, if it is a cold day and you want to get the heated steering wheel or heated seats turned on, you have to kind of find them on the screen, and the icons themselves can be a little bit small and fiddly to hit whilst you're driving, because this being a Cupra Born and not an ID.3, being a sporty EV means the ride can be a bit firm and a little bit jiggly. Also, again, ergonomically, we've got the heated steering wheel here on the right hand side, but the heated seats are in the top left hand corner. I'd like to see that down here so everything's kind of nicely grouped together. So when it comes to the infotainment system, it's not the best. However, in terms of blessings, we have got Apple CarPlay, which is wireless, and Android Auto, which I think is wireless as well, but don't quote me on that. Now, sticking with touch sensitive buttons, we're going to move straight on then to the steering wheel, where these buttons are touch sensitive and you do get a haptic feedback from them, but you can accidentally hit some of these buttons. You can then hit the buttons and actually not activate anything. It doesn't do what you want it to do. It can be a little bit hit and miss. The volume, which when you move up and down feels like a actual little dial that you're moving up and down like you have been used to in Volkswagen Group cars, except you can't press it to mute, which is what you used to be able to do in a Volkswagen Group car. So that's a little bit disappointing. Audi have proven that by actually taking a step backwards, going from the e-tron to the Q4, which now has physical air conditioning buttons. So Volkswagen Group, don't take this as a massive kind of criticism, but just take a step back. Give us some physical buttons. Give us some rotary knobs so we can do the simple tasks really nice and easy and not have to go into various menus, which can be distracting, especially whilst you're driving. And then finally, we've got a 5-inch digital dashboard display on top of the steering wheel column. And next to that, we have got a little rotary knob there, which does your gear select. And I do love the fact it's up there and out the way. I forgot to mention that button as well for the park, which is on the end. But the digital dashboard display is really nice and clear. It's easy to read and you're not bombarded with information whilst you're driving. And you can have little sections where on the left hand side you have things like your radar guided cruise control and lets you know how that's operating. So all in all, in the front of the Born, it's a nice interior to sit in. I do love the fact that the screen is tilted towards the driver. It feels very focused on the driver as well. I love the materials used. But when it comes to the functionality and usability of the Born's interior, it is a little bit of a letdown. It is a little bit lacking. I can see what Volkswagen Group were doing when they designed this whole touchscreen system. It just must have looked really good on paper, but in practice, it still needs a few tweaks on it. But other than that, yeah, it's a nice place to be, but it does need some improving. And I will not hold it against Volkswagen Group if, like Audi, they take a step back and reintroduce physical buttons into the cabin. But yeah, I think that's enough of being sat in the front of the Cupra Born. Let's see what it's like in the back. So sat in the back of the Born, it is actually a nice, comfortable and spacious place to be. I could definitely see myself doing a medium to even long journey in the back here. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a good amount of knee room, and headroom is not too bad either. However, I do think if you're perhaps over 6 foot tall, you will feel a little bit cramped and claustrophobic back here. And also, I would recommend the seats in the back be suitable for 2 adults, not 3, because the Born doesn't feel that wide. However, you could get 3 kids back here. Now, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports, and I love the fact that on a Volkswagen Group product, we have got plastic covers, but they don't detach. They actually just flick down, exposing the ISOFIX bars, which makes it really easy to affix a child seat. Also, the doors themselves open quite generously, not a full 90 degrees, but it should help with affixing that child seat and getting in and out of the Born. Now, it's not devoid of features back here. So we have got a couple of USB-C charging inputs, so you can charge your mobile devices. However, we've not got any through loading into the boot, and actually we haven't got an armrest to pull down. And speaking of cubby spaces, we got some very decent sized door pockets, and we got our aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. So that's a little bit disappointing, but if you do go to the V3 spec, you do get through loading and you actually get a center armrest with a couple of additional cup holders. So at least that is something, but it does mean you got to pay a bit extra money. And then finally, we've got the windows. They are of a really nice size. They do allow a good amount of light in, and they open about 90% of the way down, but you can still rest your arm on the armrest there on the windowsill. So at least that is handy. The only other thing I will mention is that there is a step down in quality back here, and even on the doors, it is hard sheet plastic and there's no fabric here, so you can't rest your arm and it feel really nice like it does up front. So that is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, it's actually not too bad here in the back of the Born. As I said, I recommend a couple of adults back here and not 3, but it is spacious enough, yeah, to do a decent journey in the Born and still come out the other end feeling nice and comfortable. And on that note, I think it's time we have a look in the boot. Opening the boot of the Born presents you with 385 litres of space, which in this segment is actually pretty impressive. And what you find when you've got the boot open is that you've got a nice wide square load area, so you can get a couple of suitcases in there or a few weekend bags. I will note, however, there is a bit of a high boot lip to navigate over, and also there is a bit of a dip behind it. Now, it's not devoid of features either. We got some sturdy tethering hooks, a couple of shopping hooks as well as a 12-volt socket, which is really handy, plus a little bit of additional storage space underneath the boot floor. Now, if you do put the seats flat, you do find that there is a massive ridge, and also the seats don't fold completely flat. It does make it almost completely flat, but you can make it easier then to load large bulky items into the back of the Born, which you can't do in this particular car. But other than that, it's a very practical, usable space, and just like any Volkswagen Group product, it's perfect for the family. So yeah, I think that's now time we stop looking at the boot of the Cupra Born and we see what this sporty EV is like to drive. So once you start driving in the Cupra Born, first impressions are pretty positive. It's a very easy and comfortable car to drive, and it is surprisingly refined in here. As I mentioned, it's really nice and easy. You just get in, press your foot on the brake, select a gear, and away you go. I really do like that feature. And as I said before, this kind of feels like a bit more of a boxy hatchback compared to a traditional one. So as a result, your driving position is a little bit higher than something like a normal Seat Leon or Cupra Leon. So as a result, I have got a really good view of the road ahead. However, the A-pillars are surprisingly thick. And on a couple of occasions, as I've been approaching a junction, a car has actually disappeared behind the A-pillar, and I had to kind of do a double take before I set off from the junction. So that's just something to be aware of. That is a very thick A-pillar. Also, the wing mirrors are of a really nice size, but they don't come with blind spot monitoring, and I've got the V2 spec. In fact, I had a little look, and I don't think you get blind spot monitoring even on the top of the range V3. However, if I am wrong, you'll see something pop up on the screen at the bottom. But they are of a decent size, and they do help with that kind of blind spot area as well. Then if I look over my shoulder, I see that I've got quite a thick C-pillar, so there is a bit of a blind spot there. And then rear visibility is a bit disappointing. It is a bit of a letterbox view. However, I am really happy that the Born comes with a rear wiper, because on a day when it was bucketing down with rain and it was all on the ground, the Born does kick up a lot of dirt and water and just puts it on the back of the car. So I'm really glad we have got a rear windscreen wiper there. So yeah, that is one positive when compared to the likes of an MG4 or a Hyundai Ioniq 5. Although in the MG4, the way they've kind of designed the tail, you don't actually get any mud and water spraying up onto the back. I think just the way they work the aerodynamics on it. But on the Born, yeah, you do get a lot of mud and water caked on the back of the screen. So yeah, first impressions of the Born, they are pretty good, but yeah, there are a couple of areas where some of its rivals are just a little bit better, especially when it comes to visibility. Now there are 3 trim levels to choose from in the Cupra Born range. There is the V1, the V2 and V3. Try not to think of any German World War II weapons when you go through the trim levels at the dealership. Now when it comes to recommendations, I say this. If you're going to go for the smaller battery, the 58 kilowatt hour battery, go for the V3. Get the top of the range, enjoy all the bells and whistles. If you're going to go for the larger battery, the 77 kilowatt hour battery, go for the V2. The reason being is if you go for the V3, price-wise, you are just nipping at the heels of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and I would personally recommend you go for that car if you're going to spend that kind of money rather than the Born, because it's just a bigger vehicle and it's just a different class of car compared to the Born and the VW ID.3. So that would be my recommendation. Smaller battery, top of the range. Larger battery, mid-range. There you go. Now there are 2 batteries to choose from in the Cupra Born range. There's a 58 kilowatt hour battery, which is what I've got on this car, and a larger 77 kilowatt hour battery. All Cupra Borns are rear wheel drive with a single motor. There's no all-wheel drive version available. I'll say yet because you never know, there could be like a Cupra Born R come out in the next couple of years. Also, in combination with the trim levels of the Cupra Born, there are 7 to choose from. So, with the V1 trim, you can only get the 58 kilowatt hour battery. With the V2 trim, you can get the 58 kilowatt hour battery with or without an e-boost. And then with the 77 kilowatt hour battery, that comes with an e-boost as standard. And it's exactly the same for the V3. So that's 7 trim levels in total in terms of combinations with the batteries and the trims. So what does that mean power-wise? Technically, all Cupra Borns have 201 brake horsepower. But if you have an e-boost, you've got a little button that boosts it to about 228 brake horsepower for a limited time, which means that this V2 version with the e-boost will hit 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.6 seconds, which is not too shabby, but when compared to other hot hatches out there which you can buy, it is a little bit lagging behind. So, with the Born that I've got here, with the 58 kilowatt hour battery and the e-boost and a V2 spec, I should have a range of around 260 miles. But I have done a full charge on the Cupra Born. Now I will tell you now, it was a bit cold. I didn't precondition the batteries or anything. It was a straight, boom, charge to 100% using a 75 kilowatt charger. It gave me a claimed range of 204 miles, which, yes, is a bit below that 260. But it's February, it's still technically winter, so I was expecting a drop in total range compared to what Cupra were telling me. So just be aware of that. Regardless of which version you go for, which battery you go for, it's going to be a little bit lower than what is claimed by Cupra, but you can say that pretty much about most electric cars out there. And then when it comes to charging, we've got the ability to do 120 kilowatt charging, so you can go from 10 to 80% in around 35 minutes or so, which is actually pretty good. It means you can do a long journey, stop off for a wee and a cup of tea, do a quick charge, and yeah, put perhaps an extra 100, 150 miles on the battery whilst you're having that break. So what's the ride refinement and handling like in the Born, as my notepad goes flying off into the distance? Well, ride-wise, for the most part, I'm going to say it's okay. Now, because the ride and the car is meant to be a warm hatchback, it is firmer than the ID.3, and on a uneven surface at low speed, it is quite fidgety. Now on this particular car, I have got 19-inch alloy wheels. If you go for the V3, they do get bumped up to 20s. So if you are after ride quality, I'd actually recommend going for the ID.3, or again, perhaps going for the V2 or V1 trim, because you get smaller alloys than you do the V3. You get either 18s or 19s. But when you get up to speed, it does settle. That's something I do like about the Born's ride. Now, I am on a road which is not the smoothest, but it is dealing with the bumps and imperfections really well. It's just at low speed, as I said, it gets a bit fidgety. And if you do go over a pothole or a manhole cover, you can get quite a loud boom and vibration coming into the cabin. So just be aware of that. But as I said, if you just speed up a bit, it does tend to settle. But as you can see, I'm still just wobbling around a little bit. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of first impressions, the refinement in the Born is actually really good. I am very impressed with the refinement levels in here. It is very quiet. As I said, you can hear the bumps and imperfections as you're going along now. Oh, and as you can see, I'm going at slow speed, so I have to kind of feel those bumps and imperfections come through. But this is definitely not a smooth bit of tarmac. But when you get yourself up to speed, tyre roar is pretty much the only major intrusion into the cabin. There's a tiny bit of wind noise coming off the A-pillars and the wing mirrors, but it's still actually a very refined car to be in. It is quieter in here, though, I would say, than an MG4. That does allow a little bit more noise from the outside into the cabin. And just going over a couple of rough bits there, you can just hear the little booms and that coming into the cabin. So again, that's just because I got those larger 19-inch alloy wheels on there. So as I said again, if you're after ride comfort, maybe the ID.3 or the V2 or V1 trim levels of the Born, I'd recommend. And then there's the handling, which again, I'm actually very impressed with. Granted, I can't handle at 10 miles an hour because I've got a car coming the other way. But the handling is actually a nice, pleasant surprise in here. The steering wheel feels really nice in my hand. I love the quality of the leather, the perforated leather as well. Definitely feels very sporty in my hand. You have got a connection to the front wheels, and because this is a rear-wheel drive car, if you do put your foot down in the corners and it is a bit damp, you do get a little bit of squirreliness coming from the rear. Now, one thing that's a bit disappointing is that you can't fully turn the traction control off. You can put it into sport mode, which kind of, yeah, just slackens it off a little bit, but it's still not fully off. You still can't have that proper fun of a rear-wheel drive car and get the tyres smoking in corners and such. So that is a bit disappointing, but I can understand Cupra wanting to play it safe there. But yeah, the feeling in the steering is really nice. There's a nice bit of weight to it as well. And it's just, yeah, you can actually have a bit of fun with the Cupra. You can chuck it into the corners. I wouldn't say it's proper hot hatch fun because you've got that high roof line. It does feel taller than a conventional hot hatch. So again, that's where it loses out a little bit because of that body shape. But in the future, I'm sure we'll come across a new Cupra Leon that's fully electric and you can have some proper fun with because it is lower to the ground. So what have been some of the highlights and low points I've experienced living with the Born this week? Well, highlights have definitely been the looks and the comfort levels and just the way the car drives. It is a nice, fun little EV to drive. It has got a good amount of performance and the handling is a highlight. I've already mentioned about the infotainment system, so I'm not going to repeat myself there, but there are touch sensitive buttons here on the door handle. One of them operates the rear windows, or I should say operates the buttons to do the rear windows, because you can select between the front and rear windows. It just seems to be a little, I want to say the word over-engineered. It doesn't need to be that way. I'd rather just have two more physical buttons to do the rear windows. That's it. Because, there you go. That took 3 goes to activate the rear windows. And if I press it again, that took 4 goes. So it's a bit of a temperamental button here on the Born. And then also I've got the wireless charging pad. It hasn't worked for me this week. Every time I've put my phone on there, and I've had about 50% battery life, it tells me it's charging and then instantly tells me to take my phone away and it's not working. I'm just trying to think now. Oh, okay. The head-up display, it's literally just done it for me and just jogged my memory. I've got augmented reality with the head-up display, and by that I mean if I put in anything into the inbuilt sat-nav, it will come up on that screen and tell me where to go. I do like that system. But I can be driving around and all of a sudden I'll have this weird little snake appear on the screen and it's telling me where the edge of the road is, but I can see it. I can see the edge of the road. I don't need any guidance there whatsoever. But I did drive the Born home from work this week and it was actually very foggy. And I didn't see that snake appear at any point. And that was actually when I needed it. I needed it during those moments where I couldn't see the road ahead. So that was a little bit annoying to say the least. And it's now appeared there showing me where the line is or the edge of the road, but I can already see it. So what are my thoughts on the new Cupra Born? Well, in terms of an electric vehicle, I think it is a very good electric vehicle. I think it drives really well, it handles lovely, it's very refined, and although it is a bit of a firm, sporty ride to it, it is still pretty comfortable. I think as well in terms of the charging and the range, yes, I couldn't get what was quoted, but then again, it is still February. I think it is still very decent for the price bracket. The only issues are the usability of the infotainment system is just, yeah, it's just a little bit behind what Volkswagen Group, I think, want it to be. Have a look at the MG4 if you are looking at the ID.3 or the Cupra Born. And if you are looking to just get the big battery along with the top spec, go have a look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5, because that is in the class above and just in the price range of the top of the range Born. But as a standalone car by itself, it is very good. It's a very good electric vehicle, but there are just quite a few little niggles that do stand out. And to answer the second question, is this a hot hatch EV? No, it's not. The main reason being is the figures kind of suggest that. This car weighs over 1,800 kilograms, over 1,900 once I sit in the car. 0 to 60 times 6.6 seconds is just nowhere near what the main hot hatches in this price bracket can do. For an extra 5-6 grand, you can get yourself into a Civic Type R, you know, just as an example, and that hits 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds, and that's a front wheel drive car. Granted, yes, it's not electric. I would consider the Cupra Born to be a warm hatchback, however, not a hot hatch, or just refer to it as a performance version of the Volkswagen ID.3, because essentially that's what it is. It is an ID.3, but with more performance and better looks. So yeah, I would not consider the Cupra Born to be a full-blown hot hatch, but I know Cupra could easily make this a proper hot hatch, easily. But they just, I think, might need Volkswagen Group to give them the green light there. And also, they just need to make sure that the price bracket doesn't put it into that Ioniq 5 territory. So yeah, the Cupra Born, it is a very good car. I don't know, it feels like it's missing an X factor to it, especially with that Cupra badge. It's a very good warm hatchback EV, but I don't know, I just feel like there's something missing with it. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new Cupra Born EV. Please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the Born and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below, and don't forget to follow on social media as well for additional content. But in the meantime, guys, I hope you have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care, everyone, and bye-bye.